So as you know, or maybe you don't know, we've been studying the Mitzvah of Kiddush, and we're trying to understand a Gemara in Masechta Shabbos on Daf Chav Gimel. The Gemara there relates that Rava vacillated back and forth on the following question. A person has only limited funds. He's a poor person. He has enough money for one of two mitzvahs. In this case, for either the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, to buy the oil for Ner Chanukah, or alternatively, he could use those monies, those limited funds, to buy Yayin Lekiddush. And you know that Chanukah overrides with Shabbos by definition one time, if not twice. And he goes back and forth until he finally concludes that Ner Chanukah Odif, that Ner Chanukah takes precedence over Yayin Lekiddush, and he gives a reason because Persume Nisa, Kiddush is not public, but Ner Chanukah is meant to be public. And the Rishonim, I'll mention a few as we go along, are bothered by the following question. At the end of the day, no matter how high-powered you want to classify Ner Chanukah, it still remains a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. In fact, the Gemara talks about whether or not we can make a bracha asher kidshanu v'mitzvosav v'tzivanu with regard to Ner Chanukah. Where v'tzivanu? Heichen tzivanu? It's not anywhere in the Torah. And yet, the mitzvah of Kiddush is d'oraisa, derived from the pasuk Zocher es Yom HaShabbos l'kadsho. So how could it be possible, ask the Rishonim, and it's not just the Havamin of Rav, it's actually his final conclusion, that Ner Chanukah takes preference over Yayin Lekiddush when Kiddush is d'oraisa. Now here, we have one school of thought which is represented by the Rambam and the Rashba, and in Tosfos there are two opinions, but one opinion in Tosfos for sure, that Yayin as a requirement for Kiddush is only d'Rabbanan. The Torah doesn't require Yayin. And as far as Torah law is concerned, you could fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush with Amiras Divrei Shevach, even without Yayin. And therefore, we downgrade the requirement of Yayin to a D'Rabbanan level. And in this Mahalach, the approach to the Gemara is that we have here a choice between two mitzvos, both of which are D'Rabbanan, Ner Chanukah on the one hand, and Yayin Lekiddush on the other. And since Ner Chanukah has the additional element of Pirsum HaNes, that tips the scale in favor of Ner Chanukah to override, in this case, the mitzvah of Yayin Lekiddush. So again, just to summarize, one approach to this Gemara in Shabbos is to assume that Yayin, as a requirement for Kiddush, is only d'Rabbanan. However, there's a sugya in Masechta Nazir about whether or not a Nazir who's enjoined from drinking wine drinks the wine of Kiddush. And the Gemara there on Daf Daled Amud Aleph in Nazir uses the language Mushba v'omed me'ar Sinai. What does that mean? At Har Sinai, each and every one of us took a shvuah that we have to drink the wine of Kiddush. And this is the text of the Gemara in Nazir and Daf Daled that appears in our printed Gemaras. It's the text of the Mefaresh, that's the super commentary on Nazir, and it seems to be the interpretation of Rashi elsewhere. Not only that, there's a compilation of a work that is attributed to Rashi called Sefer HaPardes, And the Tosfos Rid in Nazir and in Psachim quotes the Sefer HaPardes that Yayin is mushpavi omed mehar Sinai, that we all took an oath to drink the wine of Kiddush. That took place at Har Sinai, which means clearly that Yayin is Doraisa. We no longer, therefore, according to this school of Rishonim, have the option of saying that Ner Chanukah beats out. See, I don't want to use the word trumps because it reminds us too much of the new administration, but that's just a joke. But the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah overrides the mitzvah of Yayin L'Kiddush because Yayin L'Kiddush is only D'Rabbanan. We don't have that option according to this school of Rishonim, and therefore we have to come up with some other answer. And the answer has to fit, I believe, into one of two categories. Either we're going to have to upgrade Ner Chanukah, or we're going to have to downgrade Yayin L'Kiddush. So again, let's go through these two approaches. And the premise now is that Yayin L'Kiddush is Doraisa. How then can Ner Chanukah take precedence over Yayin L'Kiddush? So the first approach is to suggest that what the Rabbanan are doing in Ner Chanukah is they are establishing how and when you fulfill a mitzvah d'oraisa. There are many mitzvahs d'oraisa which are left hanging, so to speak. They're ambiguous in the sense that the Torah doesn't specify exactly how to fulfill the mitzvah. Here's where the Rabbanan, with their authority as the Chachmei Yisrael, they will fill in the blanks. They will tell you how and when to fulfill that mitzvah. So, for example, and again, everything I'm saying now has to be analyzed very, very carefully, not for now, but Ner Shabbos. We assume that Ner Shabbos is Doraisa. But Rashi seems to assume that Ner Shabbos was instituted by the Chachamim in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Ushmartem Yodas Nafshel Seichem, meaning that in the darkness of night, if you don't have any sort of candle lit, like on Shabbos, you can't light a Shabbos candle, obviously, then you might trip and fall. And we know what happens when people fall. So what the Rabbanan were doing then, they were establishing the mitzvah of Ner Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, to guarantee that we won't get hurt on Shabbos. So they're really establishing the method and the time to fulfill the mitzvah of Ushmartem Yodas Nafshel Seichem. Now we have a mitzvah called Kiddush Hashem. Kiddush Hashem means to publicly pronounce the greatness, the glory of God, to publicize His miracles. We have it in this week's parsha, L'man Tesaper. And when we publicize the miracles of God, that is a Kiddush Hashem. And the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem is certainly a mitzvah d'oraisa, v'nikdashti b'tov b'nei Yisrael. However, what the Rabbanan did was they established that with regard to the mitzvah of Hanukkah, we will fulfill Persume Nisa, and in so doing, we achieve a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. So the fact that the Ner Chanukah has to be projected and presented publicly, which is called Pirsum, for the purpose of publicizing the miracle of God, that itself is a mitzvah of Pirsum Hanes. So what could be now is that the Gemara is comparing two mitzvahs d'oraisa, two Torah mitzvahs. One is Kiddush Halayayin, because we're going now again, as I said over and over again, according to that shita of Rashi in Sefer Pardes, of the Mefaresh in Nazir, of the Tosfos Rid in Psachim, and according to the shita, Yayin is d'oraisa. But that d'oraisa does not have the additional element of Kiddush Hashem. And why is that so? Because when I drink my wine of Kiddush, I'm doing so privately and not publicly. But in the case of Ner Chanukah, where I am demonstrating and projecting the Nes in a public arena, then what the Rabbanan are doing is they're telling you how to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. And that extra dimension of Kiddush Hashem elevates or upgrades the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah to a doraisa on the level of Kiddush Hashem. And that will override the mitzvah doraisa of Yayin L'Kiddush, because Yayin L'Kiddush lacks that dimension or that kiyum of Kiddush Hashem. The other way of doing it is to downgrade the mitzvah of Yayin. Ein achinami, Yayin is doraisa. True. The Torah requires me, according to this school of thought in the Rishonim, to be Makadesh al Hayayin. However, is that absolutely le'ikuva, meaning is it totally and completely indispensable, critical to the kiyum mitzvah? Or perhaps we could suggest that although the Torah requires me to make Kiddush al Yayin, it's only a, shall we call it a tosefes? It's an enhancement of the mitzvah doraisa. The Torah might say that, you know what? On one hand, you can fulfill the nitty-gritty basic mitzvah of Kiddush. And here I'm going to use the language of the Rashba, kol echad v'echad kefishi izdamilam. Every individual will just simply sing the song of praises, express how great Shabbos is in his own subjective way. Now the Torah says, I want you to do that over a kos of yayin. And that's going to upgrade your Kiddush to a level of Shira. Because the Gemara says in Brachos on Daf Lamed Hey that Ein Shira El Al Yayin. This we derive from the Sachim, from the song of praise of the Levium at the time of Nisuch Hayayin. So what we're saying now is, yes, it's true that Yayin L'Kiddush is Doraisa, but nevertheless, it is only an enhancement of the mitzvah, which the Torah obligates us to do, but it's not absolutely indispensable. That's a double negative, meaning you can fulfill your mitzvah of Kiddush even without Yayin. So, for example, yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I maybe I missed something at the beginning.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
No, probably I missed saying something.
No, the idea, you can't, how are you going to do Kiddush before Ner Chanukah?
I'm not sure. What do you mean before? You're talking on a... you're talking
in a... Once it's Shabbos, you can't light the candles.
Right.
So that you would have to do Ner Hanukkah before you take in Shabbos, if I understand you correctly.
You have only so much money, and you have to choose between these two mitzvot. That's the issue.
But
yeah, that's what I wasn't clear about. We weren't talking about priority in time.
We're talking
about a priority of either mitzvah or the other. You have a choice of one mitzvah or the other. And we were wondering why Rava says that in that choice situation, spend your very last Canadian dime on Ner Chanukah, on Shemin L'Ner Chanukah.
Right. Okay,
your pocket is now empty. You can't even buy a revius of yayin. So we wondered, well, okay, if Bishlema, according to those Rishonim, and there are many Rishonim who maintain that Yayin L'Kiddush is only a rabbinic institution, and therefore Yayin L'Kiddush is D'Rabbanan compared to Ner Chanukah, which is also D'Rabbanan. So I might want to tip the scale and give preference to Ner Chanukah because it has the additional dimension of Pirsumei Nisa. But if I hold, like those Rishonim, that maintain that Yayin L'Kiddush is Doraisa, and the Torah itself requires me to make Kiddush al Yayin, then why would the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, with all due respect, override the mitzvah Doraisa of Yayin L'Kiddush? Again, according to those Rishonim that hold that Yayin L'Kiddush is Doraisa, and we suggested two approaches. One approach is to upgrade the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah and grant the authority of the Chachamim to establish Ner Chanukah as a kiyum of the mitzvah Doraisa of an Ikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael by publicizing the miracle, an element that's lacking in the case of Kiddush. Another approach is to say that, wait a minute, I think we went too far. Even according to those Rishonim who maintain that Yayin l'Kiddush is Doraisa, Ad Kan. Yes, l'chatchila, if all things are well and equal, go and head and make sure that you make Kiddush al Yayin. That's what the Torah requires. But it doesn't mean that Kiddush is meaningless without Yayin. Kiddush would be a fulfillment through the Amira of the Shevach, even if I don't have Yayin, because Yayin Doraisa is a Chiyuv Lechatchila. We'll call it a Tosefes, an enhancement to the mitzvah, but it's not absolutely critical. And if that be the case, then the Gemara Rava might be saying the following: you know what? You can have your cake and eat it too. You can be Mekayim the mitzvah of Kiddush, and at the same time, go ahead and use your last dime to buy Shemen l'Ner Chanukah, be Mekayim the mitzvah Ner Chanukah. Yayin is Doraisa for Kiddush. The answer is, in this particular situation, I'm going to have to forfeit Yayin, but I will still fulfill my basic primary mitzvah of Kiddush. Zochar es yom ha-Shabbos l'kadsho kadsheu b'dvorim. Now, I want to mention to you the Ran, and he claims it's based on a Bahag, that you know what Rav is talking about? Unbelievable. Rav is talking about a case where he has pas. He's got a loaf of bread in the refrigerator. And when Yayin is Doraisa for Kiddush, it means you have a choice of Yayin or pas. And if you have pas in your kitchen, then you could fulfill the mitzvah Doraisa of Kadsheu ala Yayin with pas, because pas and Yayin are interchangeable. And he quotes a Gemara in Psachim that says that Rav, the Amora Rav, would sometimes, if he was in the mood, he would make Kiddush al pas without Yayin. Obviously, then, we must draw the conclusion that pas is as much of an option as Yayin. And basically, how do you decide whether to make Kiddush al Yayin or on pas? The answer is, the Gemara says, depends on Chavivusa. What's he in the mood for? The man is starving, he hasn't eaten in a day, so let him make Kiddush on pas. He doesn't want to drink wine on an empty stomach. And when Rava says that you will use your last dime to buy Ner for Chanukah and forfeit the Yayin, that's talking about a case where he has pas in his kitchen somewhere, and he'll fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush Doraisa with pas. And I don't want to prejudice you, but I had trouble with this, Ron. On a textual level, I don't see it in the text of the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't qualify that Rava's conclusion that he should prefer to buy Shemen l'Ner Chanukah rather than buy Yayin l'Kiddush is because he has pas, up there in his freezer. Vushtetas, it doesn't say that. The impression you get is that Rava made an absolute statement that under all circumstances, whether you have pas or you don't have pas, Ner Chanukah comes first, which makes sense again if the entire requirement of Yayin is the Rabbanan. But we're going according to those Rishonim who say Yayin is the rice. Now, here we get to a little bit of a brick wall. And that is, how could these Rishonim go to bat for the assumption that yayin lekiddush is doraisa. How could that be? The Torah says Zocheres Yom HaShabbos Lekadsho. In Yiddish, we say Vu Shteit. Where does it say anywhere in the Torah? So I give you a Tanakh. Adarabba, you show me a pasuk in Tanakh that indicates that Kiddush has to be recited on Yayin. So the one who raises this question is the Tosus Rid. I mentioned to you before that the Tosus Rid, like Rashi and Sefer Pardes, assumes, based on the Gemara Nazir, that Yayin is Doraisa. So where? Where is it in the Doraisa? And do you know what the Tosus Rid answers? Are you ready for this one? Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. That's a good answer. Whenever you're stuck and you don't know, how did we derive a Doraisa from nowhere? So instead of racking your brains and trying to come up with a solution, dig up a pasuk somewhere and reinterpret the pasuk, all you have to do is press the button that says Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Great. This was the oral transmission that was given to Moshe at Har Sinai, and fighting an Asik, you're over. That's it. Ball game over. I got a mitzvah doraisa for you because Halacha l'Moshe miSinai is doraisa, and I don't have to find the pasuk. But that's the Tosus Rid. But now, Berzon comes along, and I asked the Tosus Rid the following question, and he's not here to give me the answer. So I have to sort of, Sherlock Holmes. When you have a Halacha Moshe miSinai that requires Yayin or Pas, there are two options on an equal level. Is that requirement likuva, or is it only lechatchila? Tosus Rid doesn't answer this question. I'm not sure. I vacillate back and forth on this question. And I don't have a proof one way or the other. I can tell you this. The Tosus Rid assumes, like the Ran, that Rava's conclusion in Shabbos that Ner Chanukah gets precedence is because he has Pas. But, says the Tosus Rid, black on white he says it, if he doesn't have neither Pas nor Yayin, then Rava's halacha doesn't apply. Forget about Ner Chanukah. Halacha l'Moshe miSinai, you have to make Kiddush either on Yayin or on Pas. Your choice, but it's got to be one of the two. And that upgrades Kiddush al Yayin, again in parentheses, or on Pas, to a Doraisa. And no doubt, in anyone's mind, Rava didn't even think to say the contrary. That would override the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. As great as the mitzvah is, it's only D'Rabbanan. But I'm wondering, thinking out loud with you, is the Tosus Rid saying that if I went ahead and I made Kiddush without Yayin, without Pas, just with Amiras Divrei Shevach, would that be meaningless? Would I have forfeited the mitzvah of Kiddush or no? Like we said earlier, it could be that Yayin is Doraisa, derived from Halacha l'Moshe miSinai, but the Torah is only telling me to enhance my mitzvah. I'm obligated, if all things are equal, to go ahead and make Kiddush al Yayin or al Pas. I'm not sure whether the Tosus Rid would say that it's likuva and without Yayin or Pas, I completely forfeit the mitzvah of Kiddush. I can't tell you one way or the other. What I can tell you is that it's a little bit, shall I say, it's a very individualistic perspective, very difficult for me to assume that the Gemara of Rava is talking about a case where he has pas. I would much rather say that Rava made his statement in an absolute way that under all circumstances, this is what the din is. And therefore, I'm inclined to think that in a case where he doesn't have yayin or pas, what the Tosas Rid is saying is that Kiddush is going to override the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah in this case. He doesn't have enough money for both. Because of the halacha Moshe Sinai. But that's because we're dealing with the Dorais. And although he can fulfill that mitzvah Dorais without Yayin or Pas, B'di'evet, but he's not doing the mitzvah Dorais the way the Torah wants you to do it, Lechatchila. And we have many cases in Shas where we don't know if to fulfill X you need Y, or Y is only an addition. Like, for example, just something that pops into my head, Yibum, in the mitzvah of Chalitza. So Chalitza requires a Maisa Chalitza, and she pulls off his Na'al. And it also requires a Kriya. She has to recite a Parsha. And the Gemara is going to vacillate back and forth. What happens if she doesn't read the Parsha? Would the Maisa Chalitza be sufficient? And I'm sure there are dozens of examples where the Torah requires X ideally, but Y is sufficient without X, b'di'evet, if that's the only thing that you could do. So what I'm presenting here is the following possibility. I can't prove it to you. That the Tosas Rid, although he activates halacha l'Moshe Sinai regarding the requirement of either yayin or pas l'kiddush, that's only l'chatchila. That's only to fulfill the ideal. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu got at Har Sinai. But as far as b'di'eved, if he doesn't fulfill the mitzvah in the ideal way, and he doesn't have yayin or pas, then we read the pasuk Kipshuto without the halacha Moshe Sinai Zachar Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho Kadsheu B'Dvarim. And it's very interesting because the Rishonim point out that if, let's say, you have both yayin and pas, and they're equally chaviv, he's not in the mood more for this or for that, then he should choose yayin. But that's already a different halacha. That's already, what we call hidur mitzvah. A certain hidur mitzvah of using yayin. But now we come to the conclusion that according to Tosas Rid, even though I grant you that b'di'evet you could be yotze the mitzvah of Kiddush without fulfilling the halacha l'Moshe Sinai of yayin or pas, nevertheless, this would override Ner Chanukah. Why? Because since the Torah requires, if all things are equal, yayin or pas, you don't have either yayin or pas. In such a case, go ahead and get yourself either yayin or pas. Forget about Ner Chanukah. Because an enhancement of a mitzvah d'oraisa, which is required by the Torah, overrides a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, even if that mitzvah d'Rabbanan is a high-powered mitzvah of Pirsa Manis. Any questions or comments so far? Now, I want to give you one example of a halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, which is only lechatchila and not likuva. It's not absolutely indispensable. And this is a sugya in Masechta Menachos, which is called Kesher Elyon Shel Tzitzis. So we make 5 ksharim in the tzitzis, and the Kesher Elyon, which is the 5th, is derived from halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. So just make a note of this. I'm not expecting you to go through it, but there's a piece in the Chafetz Chaim's Bir Halacha, which is printed on the side of the Mishnah Berurah, about whether or not that 5th kesher, which is Halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, is an absolute requirement. And the Bir Halacha comes to the conclusion that minyan haksharim lo ma'akev, meaning the requirement to get to 5 ksharim is not likuva. In fact, he says that all you need for the nitty-gritty is what's called chulya achas im shnei ksharim, which means you have to have a knot, and you have to have on that chulya another knot, so that the chulya is sandwiched between the 2 ksharim. But the number of ksharim, which is 5, is not likuva. You could be yotze the mitzvah of tzitzis with 2 out of the 5 ksharim. And I ask you the following question. The Gemara says in Menachos explicitly that the 5th kesher elyon, is halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. I bring this to you as an example. Again, I'm not expecting you to be a baki in Hilchas Tzitzis. You could probably spend, if I'm spending a couple of months on the Mitzvah Kiddush, you could probably spend a couple of years on the Mitzvah Tzitzis. But accept it as a matter of emunas chachamim, and I'm not asking you to believe in me, but to believe in the Bir Halacha, the Mishnah Berurah, that you can have halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai that's only lechatchila, that establishes the ideal, but not likuva. And I'm suggesting the possibility that even if I grant you that yayin lekiddush or pas is doraisa through the halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, it's only lechatchila, but it is an enhancement that the Torah requires you to do, just like the Torah through halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai requires you to have 5 ksharim. Torah requires you to make kiddush either on yayin or pas. But it's only lechatchila, not likuva, and therefore b'di'eved you would be yotze with amiras dvarim al, bilvad, without neither a kos nor a pas, because zocher es yom haShabbos l'kadsh kadsheu b'dvarim. So what this would mean is that in a situation where you have pas, so you could be makayim the mitzvah kiddush with the halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, with the additional dimension of pas, then in such a case, although it would be a hidur mitzvah to make kiddush al yayin, you would use your last dime to buy ner Chanukah. Because although Ner Chanukah is d'Rabbanan, I would rather achieve the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah than, I don't want to forfeit the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, even if it means I will forfeit the Hidur mitzvah of Yayin. But I will have the basic kiyum of Zochres Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho ala pas. Now, just to complete our discussion about the Tosas Rid, who derives Yayin L'Kiddush from halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, and elevates it to a doraisa level, and again, it's either yayin or pas. Let's go back to the case of a nazir. The nazir is enjoined from drinking wine. If he goes in and he drinks a revius yayin, he gets malchus doraisa 39 lashes. What does he do about Kiddush on Friday night? Tosfos Reed quotes the Gemara in Nazir that he's mushba v'yomid me'ar Sinai to make Kiddush al yayin, and therefore his Nazirus does not override yayin, which is mushba v'yomid me'ar Sinai. So I want to make 2 points. Point number one, I believe that the Tosfos Rid is against Tosfos, which is fine. I mean, they're different Amoraim, different Rishonim. Tosfos says that Kiddush al yayin is doraisa, but not to drink the wine. You don't have to drink the wine. The doraisa requirement is to recite Kiddush on a cup of wine, which elevates your Kiddush to a new level. But the Torah never required that you drink the wine. That was a rabbinic requirement. Now, if I accept that Tosfos, then the Gemara Nazir makes no sense, because the Nazir is enjoined from drinking wine. He'll make Kiddush on a cup of wine, fulfill his mitzvah doraisa, because he said he recited the Kiddush on a kos of yayin. So he's mushba v'yomed me'ar Sinai on a cup of wine, but he doesn't have to drink the cup of wine.
He's able to
violate his Nazirus. Yeah, go ahead.
He's able to get enough from
to get a what?
Wine?
I didn't catch
Hana'a.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not
a Nazir is only asa b'shtia. He's not asa b'no. So it's very interesting. The Tosfos Rid assumes that his Nazirus, which normally generates an Isur Shtiyas Yayin, will not apply vis-a-vis Kiddush, because there's a mitzvah doraisa of Shtiyas Hayayin. Not enough to recite Kiddush alakos, he's got to drink the wine. And if he has to drink the wine, that blocks Nazirus from being chal as an Isur of Shtiyas Yayin. That's the first point I wanted to make. You see how wealthy the sugi is, so many different dimensions. The Tosfos Rid goes on to say that if this Nazir has a pas, then the Torah doesn't command him to drink the wine. He can make Kiddush al pas. Because when the Torah through Halach L'Moshe V'Sinai requires Kiddush on, it's on either wine or pas. So he has the two options. In this case of a Nazir, he'll make the Kiddush al pas. Fine. If he has no pas, now here's where Tosfos Rid says a Chiddush. Tosfos Rid says even if he has both yayin and a pas in front of him, if the Nazir picked up the wine, miher v'kafats, he jumped before anyone got a chance to stop him, and he recited Kiddush on the yayin, he's got to drink the wine. So again, if lechatchila he would ask us, Rabbi, what should I do? I'm a Nazir, but I have to make Kiddush, so I would tell him to make Kiddush al pas. If he has no pas, I'll tell him to make Kiddush al yayin, and he'll drink the wine. Point Tosfos Rid. If he has yayin and pas, but he went ahead and he recited the Kiddush al yayin because he didn't ask me what to do, then the Tosfos Rid says he's got to drink the wine. In brisket terminology, what the Tosfos Rid is being mechadesh here, which is a gewaldige Kiddush, is that once he recites Kiddush holding on to the cup of wine, there's a chalus shem kos shel yayin, kosher kiddush, on this cup of wine. And now the Torah says to him, well, it's a kos of kiddush, you got to drink it. If it wasn't a kosher kiddush and you have two options on the table, we're going to tell you, make kiddush al pas and fulfill the halacha Moshe Messina on pas. Why should you violate the Isur Nazir when you have a way of maintaining your commitment to Nazirus and not drinking wine, but making a kiddush and maintaining your commitment to the mitzvah of kiddush by making kiddush al pas? But if you went ahead and without asking, you picked up the cup of wine and you recited kiddush, you got to drink the cup. And that's going to override Nazirus. And we're suggesting that according to Tosfos Rid, once you recited Dvarim ala kos, the kos takes on a new identity, and that new identity as a kosher kiddush generates an obligation to drink the kos. And that's a doraisa. And even if it's not likuva and it's only an enhancement of the mitzvah, the Torah requires you to drink the wine. Now, why does an enhancement of a mitzvah have the power to override the Isur Nazirus? But I think the answer is that since the kos of yayin now has a chal shem, kos shel yayin, and the Torah says that you should be drinking the wine on that this mushba b'yomim har Sinai, and therefore your Nazirus cannot override that which is mushba v'yomim. You already took a shvuah at har Sinai. You can't take another shvuah to contravene the shvuah that you took at har Sinai. Okay, Rabbi, so I'm going to stop here. And